Rachel Friedman is our next reader. She writes fiction and nonfiction and is the first from our group to have a book coming out. She's the author of the forthcoming book coming out in April, The Good Girl's Guide to Getting Lost, a memoir of 3 continents, 2 friends, and 1 unexpected adventure. She was born in a suburb of Syracuse and has worked, lived, and or traveled in more than 20 countries. She teaches literature at John Jay College. Rachel.
Hey, can you hear me? Check with Moro, because he's like this. Okay, yeah, I'm going to be reading nonfiction tonight. I'm kind of the nonfiction black sheep, I guess, of our group. So this is called Good Neighbors. Dina entered our lives at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, our first fall in Manhattan. We were a bit distracted when she rang, because our bedroom ceiling was leaking water, and not a small amount of it. My husband had muscled the mattress out into our living room, along with my childhood dresser, and tipped our IKEA bed frame up on one side. We'd only moved in a week earlier, had just unpacked our final box yesterday morning. "I'm Dina," she said when I opened the door. She wore a red terry cloth bathrobe and faded slippers. Her wiry auburn hair rested on bony shoulders. "What's happening in there?" "We have a leak," I explained. "Well, I'm not surprised. The renovations they've been doing are shoddy, and frankly," she leaned in conspiratorially, "some of them are illegal." As she spoke, I tried not to stare at the thin film of saliva coating her yellow teeth, evidence that seemed to suggest she and her toothbrush had had a disagreement many years ago and been unable to resolve it since. Although I hadn't been in New York long enough to recognize it then, Dina was an example of a particular type of elderly woman living in the city. They aren't the aged dowagers able to maintain impeccable residences in the fancy parts of the Upper East Side. They aren't the active ones in tracksuits who glow with vitality, or those who project a contented aura of being well cared for by family members. No, these weathered broads are women on their own. They board the bus with bulging plastic shopping bags and wild hair that looks like it has been styled by the nearest electrical socket. They seem to have stayed in this hard city, for too long. "Can I come in?" Dina asked, one foot already over the doorstep. "Oh, well, sure," I said, exercising my seemingly never-ending inability to say no to people, even when I desperately want to. Dina shimmied over to the bedroom to assess the damage, noting that, funnily enough, the source of the water was her apartment. Appearing pleased with herself for contributing this information, she settled in on our new beige couch, whose bland color I was already beginning to resent. Tyler, our fat beagle, launched his considerable heft up beside her. She stroked his floppy ears. "Your ears are so soft," she whispered to him. He leaned into her robe. "Tyler, you traitor," I thought. She stayed until midnight, when Martin announced there was nothing more to be done until the morning, and we should get some sleep. "Sleep? Where?" Dina asked. "I'm afraid that bedroom of yours is a no-go." "We have a pull-out," I told her wearily, and this seemed to satisfy her. She waded back through our personal belongings and out the door. In the morning, a team of repairmen arrived. Some faulty pipes needed to be attended to, and the job required access to both Dina's and our apartment. That evening, she rang our bell again. "I can tell you this much," she said, now fully dressed, sporting a cream sweater with a small brown stain on one breast. "They are only doing the work when I am home. I don't want them snooping around. I'm pretty put out, to be honest, because I've been living here for over 20 years, and they haven't done a stitch of work on my place in a decade. They've been trying to drive me out of this building for years, you know. We tenants need to stick together." I didn't want to stick with Dina. My husband and I were paying $600 more in rent than we had in Hoboken, New Jersey. Our new apartment was renovated. It had a dishwasher, and miracle of all miracles, a washing machine and dryer. It had an exposed brick wall, something I had coveted ever since discovering it was possible to get brick inside one's apartment. It was perfect, a symbol that we were moving up in the world, and I didn't want Dina spoiling it with her talk of the big bad management company. Because of Dina's obstinacy, the repairs, which should have taken 3 days, took 10, and our backs creaked angrily from too many nights on the pull-out. By then, Dina had started complaining about other things, strong cooking smells coming from our place, the inappropriate volume of our television. Soon enough, her missives began indicating issues we had nothing to do with, like the front door to the building being left wide open so that any person off the street could just wander in. She grumbled that our music woke her up at 5 a.m. No matter how many times I calmly explained that we weren't doing these things, the notes kept coming, like she hadn't heard me at all. I'm afraid the outfit you wore the other day quite upset me, I mocked her in a high-pitched voice to Martin. I'm afraid the heels you wore made an awful clacking on the staircase as you came and left the building. I'm afraid you and Martin might one day have a child who will cry. I tore up one of her notes for dramatic effect. That woman is a nut job, I said. She's just an old lady, he reasoned. She's got nothing better to do. It should be noted that my husband is a far nicer person than I am. Just let it go, he said. Oh, I hated when he said this, because honestly, if you have to tell someone to let something go, she's probably precisely the kind of person who doesn't know how to do that. One day, Dina filed a complaint on our behalf to the city of New York, claiming our apartment violated building codes because the window near the fire escape was partially obstructed by the oven. Our super called to reassure me. I'm going to look into this fire escape situation right away, he said, sounding a bit frantic. What fire escape situation, I asked. Your complaint that the fire escape is blocked. I knew instantly, Dina. I'm not entirely sure why the note we received a few days after that was the one that sent me over the edge. It was no more or less infuriating than the others, this time requesting, quote, kindly stop using chemicals in your apartment because I'm afraid they are affecting my asthma. After 5 months, it had become painfully obvious that our shiny new apartment was more like an old woman with a taut facelift, barely pleasing on the surface, but still housing a decrepit 8-year-old body inside. After the ceiling leak, we discovered that the pipes hadn't been properly insulated, so once winter hit and the heating got turned on, they clanged all night long. The renovations the management company continued in the building as they slowly kicked out every old tenant except Dina, unleashed a torrent of dust mites in our living space that destroyed the flesh of both my legs while I slept. These major inconveniences were supplemented by a list of smaller appliance breakages that seemed never to end. So maybe it was the apartment itself that wore me down, or maybe it was the fact that the only neighbor who actually acknowledged our existence was a raving loon, but the chemical note finally forced me to act. I tore it off the wall and marched upstairs. I banged on Dina's door using my fist instead of the knuckles, like I'd seen angry men do in the movies. We are not using chemicals, I said when she appeared. We are not playing loud music, and we are not leaving the door open. Inside her apartment, I glimpsed stacks and stacks of plastic bags, filled with who knew what, occupying every corner of the tiny space. It was where plastic bags went to die in that apartment. I could see that Dina did not have exposed brick. I admit this pleased me. I was willing to bet there was no washing machine tucked away in the corner of the bathroom either. Well, my asthma really gets aggravated by chemicals, she said. I was used to this by now, her ignoring what I said and simply circling back to her own argument. We are not using chemicals, I repeated. Do you understand? Well, I can smell them. Well done you, I shouted. But the facts remain, it isn't us. Here's the deal, crazy lady. Don't ring my bell. Don't leave notes. Don't call the city. Just get a life and stay out of mine. With that, I stormed dramatically back down the stairs and slammed the door. Even though I never play loud music, I turned some on just this once, just to make my point. I told Martin what happened later that night. Whoa, he said, looking at me a little sideways, like he didn't quite recognize me. His wife, who wasn't even able to return the wrong coffee to a Starbucks barista for fear she might have to argue with him. I really lost it, I said, feeling strangely giddy. On my way downstairs the next morning, I paused outside the second-floor apartment directly below ours, the one that had actually been playing thumping dance music until 5 a.m., using asthma-inducing inhalants, and having who knows what other mysterious and fun-filled adventures behind their closed door. Taped to their door was a note on the same flowery paper that Dean had used to upbraid us. I tell myself I made a snap decision to read this note not addressed to me, but in reality, I took a careful look around the building to make sure no one was present before delicately peeling back the tape, trying not to make a sound as I unfolded the paper. I'm afraid your music is still too loud and it is keeping me awake. Kindly turn it down or off in the evenings, Dina. I should have felt triumphant. Yes, I had gone overboard with the yelling and the stomping and the telling Dina she needed to get a life, but it had worked. She'd found someone else to annoy. But instead, a sort of sadness welled up in me. Dina had moved on. I had thought we were her reason for getting up in the morning, little old us in apartment 3B, who in her mind were waking up each and every morning with some new plan to upset her. But no, the couple in 2B would do well enough. When they left, which they would, and so would we eventually, she would make her presence known to the people who took their place, and so on, until she expired, because her apartment was rent-controlled, and she was never, ever, ever, ever going to leave. But us, we were replaceable. Her outrage could successfully be directed at any interlopers who passed her way. I didn't like feeling expendable, and there was nowhere to more clearly learn that lesson than in a city like New York, with a neighbor who once felt she knew you well enough to wander into your home at 11 p.m. in nothing more than a bathrobe, but who no longer even meets your eye when you pass her on the stairs.